Hey guys, Brent Hull Wednesday design video looking at a late Victorian house in Whitefish, Montana. Come join me. Okay, playing with the job in Montana, a client asked us to kind of help them kind of lay out their porch, showing you a number of different variations of how this might look and the different style traits it can take on. What does it want to be? Now, if you just look at this house in its form, okay, that's a late Victorian house. What's hard is that these elements here, I've got these big blocks of stone in here. This seems to be a much different element than this. And so, you know, one of the reasons I love, or one of the reasons that I'll tell clients, find historic photos, find historic photos, find historic photos, is because then you see what was originally there. And so, now you're sitting there looking at it going, now I don't know what's going on. So this porch is not original, okay? This was added later. And so you can see the front door here. And one of the things we're trying to help this client manage is just kind of how they get into their house. And so not only is there a style challenge, but there's also just a function challenge. And so this is the side view of that porch. When I look at it this way, this to me looks like the concrete block that was sold right at the turn of the century, early into the early 1900s. They were make your own blocks. And so these are kind of massive, they're meant to look like concrete. They may be granite, I don't know, but it looks like that kind of period in that things. You got these 1/1 windows. Notice the size of them is much smaller. So this begins to take on for me kind of an arts and crafts feel. And so this then is Victorian, 1880s, 1890s. This then becomes early 1900s, and we've got an addition. Not that that's terrible, but it's different. One is, how do we fix this, okay? And how do we make it better? The other thing is that, you know, where's the front door and where do we put it, okay? So one thought, one idea was, you know, that we fix this side of the house and that this becomes the new entry. So in this version, essentially what you're doing is there's that addition, that thing that was the front porch. This was the front door, but now we're making this a sunroom. Currently the front door is right here. We're going to move it over onto this side. So we're going to move it over here into this opening here. And then this opens up a bunch of different opportunities for us, because now we could walk into a mudroom, right? It goes back to a pantry. There's an office, a very functional area here that then you go back to the kitchen, family dining room back here, and this becomes a sunroom. So that to me seems like a very practical way of doing it. And so if you're doing it that way, then we can come up with a number of different options, like maybe we're going back with some Victorian features here. Maybe we can get a lot more natural light in there if we took out that block stone. Again, taking out those windows, you got the transoms, you got a big sunroom in here. You got a version where you do a porch all the way across there and really kind of play up the Victorian aspects of this. You could do Italianate Victorian, where you've got more porch details and more porch elements here. So the number of different porches and a number of different exploring of this idea over here. At the same time, you've got good ideas for this side porch where you're putting on ideas like this. So we've given the client a number of different things, and now you're wrestling with a number of different elements. Now you're saying, okay, well, functionally, it makes more sense to come over here, but because this was historically the front door, maybe we're changing that around. I think currently the kitchen's back here, and so we were playing around with different ways of moving things around where everything goes. And so it's an interesting problem and an interesting challenge, but there's two things to do in my mind on this job. One, you've got to figure out, you know, what style is it, okay? So what does this house want to be? And so when we're doing that, we are playing around with different architectural elements, playing up that late Victorian look, that 1890s look. We're trying to contribute to that story, because currently this is not terrible, right? This is a Victorian house with an arts and crafts addition. It happens, right? It happens all the time. And so 20 years later, the family needed a little bit more room, so they took that front porch and converted it into this. So in one argument, and you've heard me talk about it, that there's a story here, and we kind of play up that story. What I would do if we wanted to stay in that vein, if you wanted to continue to tell that story, is I'd probably tell it better, okay? I'd probably, I don't know why we've got such a big entablature here for an arts and crafts edition. I'm not sure, I like the big strong brackets coming out here, but I might de-emphasize those and try to play up and give this area a little bit more light, give it a better door. I don't think this is terrible. We would just probably play around with what we're doing here, and I think one of the versions where is that, that might play up a little bit more of the arts and crafts with the Victorian. That's a little bit more Victorian. But you're seeing what we're doing here is we are using these architectural elements to communicate and tell a story. Because right now, if I take out this, I've got this gable end and this gable end. If we go back to that historic picture, what this tells me about the house is that it was a early Victorian house, simple, okay? There wasn't a lot of gingerbread on here. There wasn't a lot of crazy stuff. Maybe because it's in Montana, right? Maybe because it's just kind of in a rural outpost area and it's not a major city. So we're seeing subdued high-end Victorian. So, when I look here, was there more architectural oomph in these areas? I think there was probably a little bit more, but certainly there's not much now. So when you see us going back on these different variations, we are dollhousing up. We are turning up the dial a little bit on this one so that we've got a little bit of more architectural punch at that entry, right? We're sending clear signals and clear communication of where the front is. On these, we are also doing the same thing. We're also emphasizing and telling a grander story. We're communicating kind of where you want to go. We've added really great architectural elements to this house that help tell a different story, maybe a better story, maybe a more updated story, but something that's still contributing to the historical integrity, authenticity of the house, if you know what I'm saying, right? So I don't want to add a 2025 addition to this house with hardy siding, vinyl windows, it would look terrible. So you've got to stay in the period, we've got to stay in the architectural era so that it's still overall the narrative and the story is well said and well communicated, and we're doing that with different architectural elements. I think this is really fun. Ashlyn did a great job. Let me know what you guys think. Okay guys, so 1890s, right? House that kind of wants to tell a story, a little bit confusing. Boy, you can take some architectural details and really dial up that house, really make it special, really make it beautiful, but it's all in the detailing. Imagine what you'd done if kind of a new guy had, tried to put hardy siding on it and bad columns and ugly windows, right? Could have destroyed that house. Now it looks beautiful. Let me know what you guys think. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.